Ever notice how relationships get, well, more interesting as we get older?
Interesting how.
Well, like the rules change, right? And things aren't
Okay.
always so straightforward.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into a fascinating perspective on middle-aged relationships.
Okay. Tell me more.
We're looking at a Chinese text that lays out the unspoken rules of flirtation.
Unspoken rules, huh? This I gotta hear.
And get this, it's all about sesh, this term that captures that space between friendship and romance where things get blurry.
Okay, so kind of like that in-between zone. More than friends, but not quite lovers.
Exactly. It's that flicker of attraction, the unspoken understanding, maybe even a touch of longing.
Lots of longing.
Hmm.
But wrapped up in this ambiguity, that's what makes it so intriguing.
It reminds me of that scene in Lost in Translation, where Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson are whispering at the bar.
Oh, yeah, I see.
There's that undeniable connection, that chemistry, but we're left wondering, like, what does it all mean? Total surf vibes. It's all about that unspoken connection, that feeling that something more simmers beneath the surface. And what this text does so well, I think, is it explores how this surf plays out in the lives of middle-aged people.
And that brings us to the first unspoken rule. And, get this, the text suggests that for many in midlife, it's less about finding a soulmate and more about finding an emotional haven.
An emotional haven. So not about love.
Well, that's the thing. This whole emotional refuge idea, it really makes you rethink those chance encounters or those lingering glances across the room.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
The text, it draws this clear distinction between A, which is love, and otria, which translates to emotional refuge.
It's like two different animals, basically.
Right, exactly. It argues that true love, that passionate, all-consuming love, that's for the young, or at least those with true independence, emotional and financial.
So then what about everyone in between? What are they looking for if it's not the one? That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It suggests that for a lot of middle-aged people is less about finding a life partner and more about seeking solace, understanding, a break from the routine, or maybe even, dare I say, a bit of excitement.
I've been there. Just that feeling you get when you connect with someone and they just get you, you might not be thinking marriage and kids, but there's that shared understanding.
That just clicks.
Yes. And that takes us to the second unspoken rule, which delves into, let's just say, the more physical aspects of these ambiguous relationships.
Okay, so we're talking about the physical needs behind the facade.
The text seems to suggest that physical desire, it can be a very powerful motivator, often masked by this more emotionally ambiguous dynamic.
So it's not always about finding a shoulder to cry on.
Sometimes it's about something else entirely. And it even hints at this idea of using one's value to gain something in these relationships.
Value, like what do you mean by that?
It's a little bit unsettling, to be honest. The text doesn't go too deep, but it implies this sort of exchange, you see, where your looks, your social status, even your wealth, it all comes into play.
So you might be using your value, whatever that may be, to get something you want.
That's how it seems, yeah?
And we're still in this whole sun zone.
Right. It makes you think about, like, intentions and expectations and the potential for things to go really wrong, if we're being honest, especially if someone's already in a relationship.
Okay, so maybe not the most ethical approach, to put it mildly. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's move to rule number 3. This one stood out to me because it's about this proverb. Quinoa, rabbits don't eat the grass near their burrow. Can you break that down?
Basically, it means don't look for romance too close to home. Like, avoid getting involved with coworkers or people within your close circle.
Keep it separate, like a fence.
Exactly. It's about maintaining boundaries, to avoid drama and complications.
Which makes sense. Who wants to deal with office gossip or those awkward run-ins at parties?
Right, exactly. Plus, the text even shares a story about a man whose wife starts up a relationship with, you guessed it, a coworker.
And it didn't go well.
Let's just say it caused a lot of problems.
Yeah.
A huge rift in their marriage and, like, this ripple effect of hurt and drama.
Oof, yeah. That's a cautionary tale if I ever heard one. But is Snush always destined for disaster? There's got to be more to it than just heartbreak, right?
You're right, there is. And this brings us to the last rule, and maybe the most interesting one. It argues that SRIS isn't just a minefield of complications, but a lens to better understand ourselves and why we connect.
Instead of judging, we should try to understand.
Exactly. These connections, even the ones that make us go, they offer insights into, the human psyche.
Everyone has a story.
Precisely. Maybe these situations are just glimpses into those stories, those hidden desires and needs we all have.
Those hidden desires, yeah. It's like we're always looking for something, right?
Always. And this text, it makes you think about the pressures of getting older, all those expectations, the weight of societal norms, long-term relationships, the good and the bad. In a way, it gives you room to explore those feelings and desires without,
Yeah.
like, turning your whole life upside down.
Yeah, without blowing everything up, right? So it's not always about looking for something outside your relationship.
Sometimes it's about understanding yourself better, finding a different side of yourself. And those connections, they don't always fit neatly into friendship or romance. That's the thing.
Okay, I get that, but doesn't that ambiguity, doesn't it make things even more complicated? What if people have different expectations? Or like, what happens when feelings get real?
You're right, that's the risk. The text even says that sun can be a source of comfort and excitement, yeah, even self-discovery,
Mm.
but it can also lead to problems, especially if it's not handled carefully.
Especially if one person's looking for like that emotional support we talked about and the other person is thinking, well, something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Different agendas. And that's why, even with all this ambiguity, you need self-awareness and communication. You've got to know what you want, but also be aware of the other person's feelings and boundaries.
It's like walking a tightrope, right? You want the connection, but you don't want to fall.
A delicate dance.
Mhm.
And we all know how that goes sometimes. The text doesn't tell you exactly what to do. There's no manual. But it does make you think about approaching these situations with more, I don't know, curiosity, I guess. Compassion, definitely. Trying to understand this whole messy thing we call connection.
So we've talked about the unspoken rules, the what ifs. What are we supposed to take away from all this?
I think the big takeaway is that relationships as we get older, they're messy. There's no easy category to put them in.
It's not black and white. It's a lot of gray.
A whole lot. And that's where sus comes in. Love, connection, all those boundaries we build, it challenges all of that.
So it's okay to admit that those gray areas exist.
More than okay.
Mm.
It's about recognizing those different ways to connect. But, and this is important, you've got to be careful.
Embrace the unknown, but don't get lost in the woods.
Right. It can be exciting. It can even be fulfilling. But you've got to be smart. Know what you're getting into. And be honest, always, with yourself and with the other person.
It's about finding that balance between, enjoying the moment and not getting your heart broken, which, honestly, that's something we all deal with, right? No matter how old we are.
All of us. This might be from Chinese culture, but those feelings, loneliness, wanting to connect, those are universal.
It's like looking in a mirror. Makes you think about why you do the things you do, what you want.
And with that in mind, think about this. It lives in that in-between space. It's blurry, it's undefined. But that feeling, that mystery, does it actually make the connection stronger?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's like they say, familiarity breeds contempt or something like that. Maybe that little bit of shush keeps things interesting. A little mystery. It keeps you on your toes, right? There's something there, I think. Like in a good story, you're always wondering what's going to happen next that keeps you hooked.
That's what keeps you coming back for more. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like life is better when you don't know everything in advance. You need that element of surprise.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of always needing a definition, a label for everything, there's something to be said for just seeing where things go.
Let it unfold naturally. Don't force it.
Exactly. Maybe that's the lesson, isn't it? This whole sush thing. It's not just about the rules or flirtation or any of that. It's bigger.
It makes you think about connection in a whole new way.
Yeah.
Like every relationship, it's a journey, right?
And you don't always know the destination.
You really don't. And that's okay. It's about being open, challenging those old ideas you have about love and all that.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for opening our eyes to all of this. It's been fascinating.
The pleasure was mine,
Yeah.
honestly. Always great to have these conversations. Gets you thinking.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. Remember, life is too short for boring relationships.
Keep it interesting.
Embrace the ambiguity. Keep talking to each other. And most importantly, never stop being curious. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.